Welcome to the Sports Pharmacy News YouTube channel. My name is Brandon Welch. I'm a clinical sports pharmacist. We have two of our masterminds on our YouTube channel today. Sean Casey, registered dietitian, strength and sports conditioning coach. And then we have Dr. Jessica Beal, also a clinical sports pharmacist. And today we're going to be talking about sports nutrition and youth athletes. What's up, guys?
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for having us. John, hi, as always.
Likewise. It's a fun topic. I'm excited to kind of dive in and share practical tips that everyone can implement.
Back to school. So, the high school and middle school athletes, they're getting very active and preparing for the season. So we're going to dive right into it. So Sean, tell us a little bit about your practical tips and recommendations for some of the youth athletes that are preparing for the season on the particular macronutrient carbohydrates.
So the first thing I always like to kind of emphasize with carbohydrates is they're really important. I think there's so much, word out there. I think everyone's trying to try and train like a bodybuilder that they're kind of scared of carbohydrates. It's going to make them fat. So the first thing to emphasize is just those, honestly, for almost every athlete I work with, that's probably the most important nutrient they get in there. Carbohydrates, for those who are not familiar with what it does, it's your supply of quick energy. So fall sports are starting up right now, so you have American football, volleyball, even like cross country, even though it's endurance, still going to be burning through a lot of carbohydrates running, and of course baseball there. So again, think about carbohydrates as your quick source of energy. And then your food sources of those are going to be your fruits and vegetables, as well as grains and starchy veggies are the main areas where you're going to be grabbing them from a dietary standpoint.
So for your typical high school athlete, is there a particular range you want these, youth athletes to kind of use carbohydrates for to help prevent what's called low energy availability?
Yeah, where I'm usually going for is, again, these are rough approximations. They can always change. But I think roughly about 50% of a diet, 50 to 60%, I think is a good range for most youth athletes. A lot of the youth athletes I work with are getting in 3,000 plus calories a day, especially if they're in high school, they're active. So to put that in consideration, 3,000 is roughly 1,500 calories. So that's like 400 grams of carbohydrates. That being said, I always try to put things in practical perspectives because people eat numbers, they don't eat or people eat food, they don't eat numbers. And so
There's a big
I
difference
always tell people
between like total calories versus good quality calories, right?
yeah,
You know,
absolutely good one. So the easy one I always think about is fruits and vegetables, especially fruits. Veggies are great too, but I always tell people, think about your fist as a serving of fruits and vegetables. I want to make sure any hard training athlete is getting in 8 servings of those a day. So that's roughly going to be a good baseline. Now, the other ones are going to be really important because if we're only eating fruits and vegetables, although extremely healthy, there's so much fiber in them, which has great health benefits, it can really start to bog down someone's diet. And so I actually find having simple ones, even like rice, can be really good. Whole grains, oats, things that those nature can be really good if in terms of providing those carbohydrate sources for athletes.
I always say too, when it comes to carbohydrates, I know oftentimes it's looked at as this homogeneous macronutrient, meaning all carbs are created equally. And one of the things that you brought up that's very important to me is differentiating between simple, complex carbs, and then you have the carbs that are rich in fiber, which you kind of mentioned. And, for your athlete who is trying to consume carbs that have high fiber in it, prior to training or prior to competition, they may have a little bit of GI upset. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. You're going to feel like you're running around with a bloated stomach, which is
You're
never
definitely
fun.
going to have the runs.
Absolutely. And we're not talking about the foot running on
Yeah.
either.
No.
Right.
And so, in those situations, that's a great point. What I usually focus on during that pre-practice or pre-game time period is more of your simpler ones. I find those tend to be gentler on the stomach. So instead of high fiber, you can grab something, be it Orange wedges, bananas. I like bananas again because they're not super high in fiber. They tend to be absorbed really quickly into the system with there. The other question I get often as it relates to carbohydrates is sports drinks. And, do we need carbohydrates during a workout session? I always find, if it's less than 45 minutes or less than an hour, especially if you're not moving around a lot, I don't think it's a huge deal. But as we're getting into those longer training sessions, or if you're doing a sport that's longer than an hour, that's where I do like incorporating simple carbohydrates in the form of sport drinks as well. And then during the non-training time periods, I'm using more of your higher fiber foods just because there's so many gut health benefits with it. Your higher fiber foods tend to be higher in antioxidants as well. If you think about your veggies, non-starchy veggies, your fruits, things of that nature.
The good thing about the high fiber foods too, to kind of piggyback off of that, is it really does a good job helping to regulate an athlete's metabolism. And so if you're trying to look for, I don't know, muscle gain, or trying to better manage your weight, making sure that you get some of these high fiber foods in your diet is going to be important. And the other good thing about it is it helps synthesize some of those key vitamins and nutrients, is because it's really helped setting up a healthy microbiome for your typical athlete, or good gut health, essentially, right?
Absolutely. Gut health is key. I think that's one of the underestimated things, which I know that's been a huge topic for our sports pharmacy team. And so I encourage anyone who really wants to deep dive in that to go check out our issues of Sports Farm.
Like, subscribe, follow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And carbohydrates too, it's almost kind of a segue into fats, because that's the other thing that I see a lot of athletes are, especially high school athletes, are really concerned about eating dietary fats. And I know this is something that's of interest on your side, Brandon. So can you kind of go over the importance of fats?
Absolutely. So, and you may agree with this statement too, Sean. And so fats, I feel like, is sometimes that unsung hero, right? Is because oftentimes it's either fats or carbs that quickly get demonized, right? It's either someone talking about how carbs are unhealthy for the average individual, and then also too many bad fats are unhealthy, which essentially is true. But when it comes to incorporating fats into your diet, you want to make sure you are focusing mainly on the healthy ones. And so one of the beautiful things about fats is it's a very calorie-rich macronutrient. So it does a really good job holding on to our energy reserve. And so just to kind of put things into perspective, so for every gram of fat that is metabolized or broken down in the body, it yields roughly about 9 kilocalories. And some of its other health benefits, it does a really good job of regulating body temperature to prevent, someone from catching a heat stroke from their body temperature getting too elevated during exercise or competition, because it has the ability to really insulate our subcutaneous tissues, which help kind of bring down our body temperature when it's exposed to high heat. Also, the good thing about fats is it helps surround our organs to help provide it protection from any type of injury or damage, especially for our sports that are high contact, such as like football, lacrosse, hockey. And so making sure you have those healthy fats to help support those organs from any type of damage. Also, one of the really important things with fats is it serves as a carrier molecule for some of our fat-soluble vitamins. So if you think of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, making sure you have sufficient healthy fats is going to do a good job helping to absorb those molecules. Also, one of the things that's often overlooked when it comes to fats is it serves as a really good backbone for hormones, specifically for a lot of our competitive athletes who are looking to put on muscle size. It serves as a good backbone for some of those sex hormones that contribute towards muscle growth, such as testosterone. Now, what are considered like healthy fats, kind of breaking these fats down into, its specific benefits. So we have saturated fats, we have our monounsaturated fats, and then we have our polyunsaturated fats, then we have our trans fats. And so typically our bad fats are considered more so our trans fats, and our saturated fats. These are the fats we really want to limit in moderation. I never like to say avoid, is because there is some benefit with saturated fats, but we just want to make sure we keep it at a limit. Typically, cardinal rule, I say, try to keep it under 7% of total calories. And so some of these examples of saturated fats can be beef, lamb, pork, dairy, for example, and some of our high processed foods, we want to make sure that we limit. And then also moving over to more of our healthier fats, such as polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. These are more of our nuts, seeds, our oily fish, such as salmon, herring, mackerel, and then even tuna. Then also making sure we're getting enough almonds. These healthy fats, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, they also have what's called anti-inflammatory benefits. So they really help reduce tissue damage and then also help with muscle recovery. And so kind of moving on over into our next topic of macronutrients, which is really going to be good for some of our athletes, is really going to be protein. And so, Jess, if you don't mind talking to a little bit about a little bit to our audience about the benefits of protein.
Yeah, so I am glad you guys picked me to get the one that people don't demonize most of the time. So protein is always the one athletes are like, I need protein, I need protein. And I know when you talk to kids or high school athletes, they can almost always tell you that protein helps with muscle. Like they know it. I think getting them to realize and eat enough is probably the biggest challenge with a high school athlete that I see. And so I'm usually, obviously the importance of protein is helping your body build muscle, restore muscle, gain muscle. And that's usually what most of our athletes are looking for. So I try and for practical purposes, get the kids to focus on making sure that they have protein at every meal. And also the biggest one that seems to move the needle is adding it to actual snacks. So making sure that when they're eating their snack, because a lot of times I'll have athletes tell me, I'm eating all these snacks and I'm always hungry. And when you look at what they're snacking on, it's usually like pretzels. It's something a very simple carb. So adding a fat or a protein to those snacks seems to help a lot of athletes move the needle in feeling more full and providing them with more energy. But for most intents and purposes, I have them, making sure they have at least a handful. If they're bigger kids, their hands are obviously bigger, so their handful is going to be bigger, but at least a handful of protein at every meal and trying to add it in to every snack that they have also.
Is there any type of protein you would recommend? You see a lot of these athletes too, they're always on the go. And oftentimes you'll see them pick up muscle milk, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a particular protein powder or protein on the go drink that you would recommend for some of these high school athletes to kind of optimize or maximize muscle growth?
Yeah. So I do get the question a lot about a protein drink, and I do recommend them a lot for high school athletes just because, like you said, they're on the go. They're going from school to practice to probably private lessons to training camps, stuff like that. So I do recommend protein drinks. I usually go with the one that they will drink is my recommendation. There are so many out there with different textures, different flavors. There are different types of protein. So there's whey protein, which is going to have a much quicker release versus casein, which is going to be much slower releasing. Some people that tolerate dairy or can't tolerate dairy may or may not tolerate those well, or as well. Some people will go with vegan or plant protein products. So I usually tell people, ask your friends, try theirs out, and which one you enjoy and you will drink is going to be the best one, versus telling you the ideal protein is getting it in your body is better than having the perfect one, is usually my lesson to high school athletes.
Is it fair to at least say stay away from the school milk?
I would say stay away from the school milk. Yeah, but I still remember being a kid and them showing the chocolate milk, which I do think a lot of people can benefit from. It has all the macronutrients in it. It's a
Yeah,
great recovery drink, but making sure you get a good one, maybe not the school milk one. I
absolutely.
think yeah, so I think most athletes understand the importance of carbohydrates where I mean of carbohydrates, of proteins where they often demonize, like you said, fats and carbohydrates. But I think it's one of the harder macronutrients for people to get in. And so it does have to be something you do have to focus on is adding protein to your diet.
And you bring up a really good point. This is something I'm not sure if you guys see it in your guys' practice as well, but I find a lot of people don't understand what an actual serving of protein is. Like if they have like a
Agreed.
sandwich or
Yeah,
something, it's like, oh, I had, yeah, there's protein, I had meat in it. Then I always ask, well, how
they had
much
like
meat in it was it? And it was like
one
one
slice.
slice of the one of those deli meats. And so
Yes,
I really
yeah.
like how you mentioned using the palm thing because I think that's an effective visual to help people guide on that. So that was a great point you brought up there.
Yeah, and I think people like we've talked about this before just off camera, but as you get older, your hand size increases with the size of your body. So me
Yep.
saying one serving size or one palm size, if you're a 10-year-old kid or if you're a 16-year-old kid, your palms are different sizes. So that's why you can actually use your palm as a good ratio because it is relative to your body size.
Mm-hmm. Yep, those are always good. Um, like I said, the fist for the fruits or vegetables, the palm there. And a nice one that popped in my mind, Brandon, on the fats is when I'm working as a dietitian with clients, is let them know like your thumb is a serving of dietary fat is always a smooth one. So that is good. Now with the other cool one that is in my mind, being that you guys are in the middle of a heat wave right now, but fluid.
Fluid,
What can
always a popular
you
choice.
say, Brandon, Jessica, share more in Florida. Now that you're in Florida, tell us about how important fluid is.
It's very important, and I feel like the adequate hydration range is so broad is because I almost feel like when it comes to hydration, it almost needs to be personalized, is because some athletes unfortunately lose sweat a lot faster than others. But typically, prior to exercise, I usually say trying to do the amount of what a regular size bottle of water is, right? So if you think of 500 milliliters, which is a regular size bottle of water, I'd say using that as a guide to try to make sure you're hydrated prior to exercise or training. And again, it's going to also depend on the training intensity, training mode, the type of competition that you're in, but most importantly, also making sure that these drinks have enough electrolytes. And some of the key electrolytes that are often depleted most in the body, and Sean and Jess, you guys can speak to this as well, is sodium, chloride, and then also you have magnesium and potassium. And so when you're assessing these sports drinks, there's so many out there. I mean, I don't even know where to start between Gatorade, Powerade, Body Armor, BioLite. I see this
BioLite.
new one that just came out called
Prime.
Elementi Elements, which claims
Yeah.
the name is zero sugar, which that kind of gives me cause to pause, but that can be a topic for another day. But just generally speaking, making sure that our sports drinks have adequate amounts of sodium, chloride, carbohydrates, and then if you want making sure that there's enough potassium and magnesium in them as well. A good assessment too to kind of indicate if your body is well hydrated, and this can be a little subjective, is your urine color. That could possibly be a little bit more practical. So making sure your urine color is constantly like a light yellow, clear colored. Obviously, you don't want to be overhydrated because that can also lead to dehydration, believe it or not, because essentially what it's doing is it's diluting some of those key electrolytes that our body needs for physiological functions. But just to kind of be practical, I think urine color is a good assessment that you can kind of check on a daily basis and that you have easily access to. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, I was going to say some of the things you brought up a ton of great points. Some of the things practical with kids is I'm always telling them, make sure start your morning off with a glass of water so you start off hydrated. Um, and they usually ask like, how much should I drink? And usually I go with, you should drink about half your body weight in ounces of water, but then that changes as you exercise. And like you said, it's very personalized depending on your sport. If you're indoor, outdoor, NAC, short, long, there's so many different things. Are you a heavy sweater? Are you not a heavy sweater? But making sure that you get that hydration throughout the day and not just the one bottle right before practice. And I think I could be incorrect in which American College of something, and even the IOC came out and said basically as soon as you lose about 2% of your body weight in water, you start having negative impacts into your performance. And if you do the math, that's not a lot of water. And so in Florida, as you know, you could lose that just walking outside to your car, I feel like some days. But, just a 15-20 minute practice outside or warm up, you can start losing so much body weight. So making sure you're hydrated. And the point to sports drinks is I feel like there's so many out there, but there's so many different nuances as to when one would be better than another. Some may have electrolytes, but no sugar. And in like maybe a short burst workout, that may be better. Where you have a longer exercise and you may need the carbohydrates. So I don't think you can truly say one sports drink is a better choice than another because it depends on what you're doing and why you're doing it and how long you're doing it and the situation. So I know a lot of times I get asked that question, what's the best sports drink? And my answer is always, well, it depends, which is not a good answer, but it does depend.
They each have its purpose, and Sean and Casey too. Sean and Jess.
Cursed with two first names.
You have the first and last name, and then also I know oftentimes when we talk about hydration, we often always talk about fluids, but also there is a lot of water-rich foods out there. And so cucumbers, broccoli, watermelon. You can easily say that 15 to 20% of your daily hydration needs can easily come from some of those water-rich food sources.
Yeah. And we were talking about like ways to monitor practical. One thing that I have found to work really well with a lot of clients I work with is because you have the ounces of water, but then, everything's fluctuating. My kind of golden rule, and before I get hammered by people all in the science community who live on PubMed all day, this is in the field pragmatically speaking. I always tell people if you're going longer than 2 hours without going to the bathroom, you're probably at least slightly heading towards dehydration. And so I find that to be a good one because, like you said, just ran into the same issue is everyone like, okay, well, I need half my body weight in ounces. So what do? They drink 72 ounces 45 minutes before they, go out of the court or like you were saying. So I found that to be a really nice thing to kind of remind people like, hey, if I'm not going to the bathroom every 2 hours, like just to get in that habit of keeping a clock on it. And then during the summer months, and this is a good tip for anyone, is if you're working with clients and all of a sudden they're just starting to have unexplained fatigue or anything of that nature, that's almost always an electrolyte. I'll have people, especially if you eat a really whole food, clean diet per se, there's not much salt naturally in whole foods. So I'll actually have people add salt into their diet during warm months. So those are a couple kind of takeaways that in the field work really good that you guys may help, those listening with clients.
So I know as far as hydration, we talked about some hallmark symptoms, right? So we talked about, so Jess, you kind of mentioned a good assessment. Some assessments, making sure that you stay less than 2% of your body weight after exercise could be a good assessment to making sure you're well hydrated. And then Sean, you mentioned about making sure that if you go longer than 2 hours without using the restroom, that can be a good indicator of being dehydrated. Now, kind of going into some of the symptoms, if ever after a workout you feel dizzy, feeling like you want to vomit, diarrhea, or you're having bad muscle cramps, those can also be good signs and symptoms that your body may be possibly dehydrated, and making sure that you supplement with enough electrolytes inside of your sports drinks could be essential.
No, those are great points. And It's interesting. I often find that people who are like low energy, headaches, things of that nature, at least on a daily basis, not necessarily over time, but on an acute basis, that's usually caused by dehydration as opposed to a lack of food. If I'm looking at a day in a snapshot. And so I love the fact that you're bringing up those key points because you're right on the nuts with respect to its importance.
Okay, I agree. Yeah, I see that with clients and even in, regular people, you don't have to be an athlete. You like anybody with, headaches, onset, fatigue, stuff like that. I feel like dehydration, so many people forget the importance of drinking water and fluids that aren't, caffeines and sodas and stuff like that. So I feel like that applies to almost everybody.
Yeah, and even coffee, tea, kind of what you were just
Yep.
explaining, Jess, that contributes to your daily hydration needs. Even though some people may say that caffeine or coffee is a diuretic, but I always say like large amounts, it starts to become diuretic. If you're consuming 4 to 5 cups of coffee, then yeah,
You
But
need to be looking at a lot of other things.
yeah,
You need that much. Like, look at your sleep, look at your
Yeah.
nutrition. We need to have some more deeper talks.
right.
But I mean, I feel like some of the kids, I mean, I know when I deal with kids, a lot of them look at like those energy drinks and coffee as kind of just socially, and they don't realize the impacts of them. So I think making sure to focus on water and electrolytes is super important.
Absolutely. Well, that was a good overview.
Great overview.
Yeah.
I hope that our audience had a lot of good takeaways from this discussion. Sean, you covered carbs, I covered fats. Jess, you did a really good job covering protein. And then overall, collectively as a group, we're called masterminds for a reason. Great job talking about hydration. It seems like everything was in sync. So anyways, guys, make sure, at least for my audience out there, make sure you subscribe to Sports Pharmacy News. We cover a host of topics. This particular one was just on sports nutrition, but we go over performance enhancing supplements. We also cover nutrigenomics. We cover the science and application of sports nutrition, all the components and pieces that help optimize human performance and improve metabolic health at the same time while reducing injury risk. Thank you guys for watching our show. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jessica. And then until next time.